Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Sean, this is Steadfast Creations, and today we're going to make this simple entertainment console out of one sheet of plywood. Let's get started. I went to the local Home Depot and picked myself up a 3/4 inch 4x8 foot sheet of poplar plywood. I chose this because it's not only strong and durable, but can accept paint and stain very well. The overall dimension of this build is 60 inches wide, 14 inches in depth, and 20 inches in height. And the only power tools you absolutely need are a circular saw and a drill. The rest are just optional, and you'll see why as you keep watching. I start off by measuring, marking, and cutting the sheet to its final width at 60 inches so that the sheet is much more manageable. And here you can see my neighbor come over and mess with me. I happen to like them, so I keep an open garage policy whenever I'm in the shop. But whenever they come through, I do make sure to put them to work. Since I didn't have a straight edge long enough to guide my circular saw all the way through this first 60-inch board, I had my buddy help secure another piece along the cut. This allowed me to use that freshly cut piece as a new straight edge to repeat the cut without any assistance. Next, I took the residual board and made 3 cuts for the 2 walls and center divider at 14 inches in depth. I didn't film it so that it's not visually redundant, but these boards will sit at over 20 inches tall. So you want to make sure you cut them down to 18.5 inches in height so that at assembly, the thickness of the floorboard and the tabletop will compensate and bring it to the planned height. But feel free to keep it as is if you want more space. Then I used my combo square to mark a line down at the end of each side on both 60-inch boards. You don't necessarily need this type of square, but making this mark was so much easier. Making marks at the top and bottom of the boards and using any type of straight edge available to you will work just fine. And if I can recommend any luxury tool out of this bunch, it would be the spring-loaded center punch. This will save you so much more time prepping and making clean countersinks and joints with screws. Using screws is strong enough for the specific dimensions of this build, but for added strength and security, I went ahead and used Gorilla Glue before driving the screws in. For the shelf, there was plenty of plywood left to make another cut at 30 inches wide. And if you take a look, I also cut out some pieces that allowed me to set the shelf high enough so I can apply pressure with a clamp. This way I can check for equal height at all corners and ensure everything is squared to the adjacent boards. Then I filled the holes with plastic wood filler before sanding it down with 180 grit to flush everything out. That way I don't take out too much material. I went with a spray gun over the traditional brush since I had one lying around that I've been wanting to test out. The first couple coats was a white primer, and I sanded it with 400 grit to make it smooth for the next coat. And if there's anything I would change during this project, it'd be to paint the pieces before assembly and definitely set up shop outside. But I learned the hard way. Then, the next day I went ahead and sprayed a few coats of gloss white to finish it off. Afterwards, I stained the top with a dark walnut finish, and to my surprise, this plywood actually accepted it very well without having to use any type of wood conditioner. You can fast forward since this step is optional and finish the assembly, but since the edges weren't painted and they were exposed, I decided to cover them for a cleaner look. With the boards I had laying around the shop, I was able to rip strips of pine to utilize as the border for the tabletop. If you choose to do this, just make sure you cut them to length for the orientation you desire, and they'll be ready to be attached by glue, brad nails, or a combination of both. Finally, I did a couple coats of wipe-on poly. I let it dry, and there you have it, an entertainment console out of one sheet of plywood with plenty to spare for another project. Alright, thank you guys for watching our very first video. If you like this build and like this content, go ahead and hit that like button, share it, and subscribe.